Now, this I would call Liberation, Theology, and Me. That was the title of a talk that I gave by Zoom last year in November of last year by Zoom there at U of D Mercy. And the video of that can be found on YouTube, on my channel on YouTube, which is called Joseph Mulligan 1. That is altogether JOSEPHMULLIGAN 1, the number 1. That's my channel. And if you just search for Liberation, Theology, and Me, you can see the talk that I gave last year. After the Jesuits, the 6 Jesuit priests and the 2 women at our university in El Salvador were brutally slaughtered by Salvadoran soldiers on November 16th, as a matter of fact, which is tomorrow, November 16th, 1989. Why were they slaughtered? Because they were speaking out for justice. They were speaking out against what in El Salvador were called the 14 families, the oligarchy, who dominated the whole society and had the police and military at their disposal, heavily supported by the US. So there was a lot to protest there especially for US people. And I described that somewhat in that video. So we were not just saying, well, we have to organize more individual service or more individual care packages or something for people in El Salvador. We're saying we have to try to change US policy, which was perpetuating a very unjust, lopsided, one-sided society. And then I also talked there about, why did Jesus die? I mean, this seems to be a very fundamental question which should come up whenever anybody enters a church. I mean, you see huge crucifixes, and the crucifixion of Jesus is a central element of our faith, the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus. But you think more people would ask, well, why did Jesus die? What happened to him? What was he doing? Was he causing trouble? Or, well, he was. He didn't just die on a sickbed. He didn't die of sickness. He was executed by the state powers of the time, the local government, basically centered around the temple in Jerusalem, of course, under the Roman Empire. But he was executed because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He was speaking out not only against the hypocrisy of the scribes and Pharisees and the chief priests, but he was speaking out against their exploitation of the poor. There's one passage where he denounces the scribes for stealing the houses of poor widows. And his option for the poor is very clear. His criticism of the rich, his call to the rich to change. Think of Zacchaeus in the Gospel of Luke. Zacchaeus was very rich, St. Luke said, very rich tax collector. He was one of the chief tax collectors. And he's the short guy who went up in the tree to be able to see Jesus as Jesus was walking by. So he might have had he seemed to have some interest in Jesus, at least to see him, and probably to hear more of his message. And Jesus came along and looked up, did not condemn him at all, did not condemn Zacchaeus for being an exploiter of his own people. He said, come down from there. I want to be with you. I want to spend time with you. Let's chat. And so he did. Zacchaeus came down from the tree, very happy. and he's said he will give half his possessions to the poor, and if he's exploited anybody, he will restore fourfold, make fourfold compensation. Okay. So that kind of challenge, criticism to the rich, always based on Jesus' forgiveness, his merciful attitude, as he showed to Zacchaeus. So why Jesus died? Because he was speaking out. He was a prophet, like the prophets of old, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the other prophets. So it's no great mystery why he was killed. And so I go into that a little bit in that talk also. Then I mentioned sin, and I'll move along a little more quickly here. What is sin? You think people would have a pretty clear notion of this, since we talk about sin so much in the church. To me, sin is the opposite of love. I mean, if love is the fundamental characteristic of the Christian, which it is, Jesus said, by this shall all people know that you are my disciples, that you love one another, and you love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, and your neighbor as yourself. It's clear. Well, then sin must be the opposite of that. Well, it is. Sin is hurting people, either individually or collectively, through the exploitation of the poor, exploitation of workers, exploitation of women, exploitation of minorities. All of that is sin because it's hurting people. It's the opposite of love. So we are called to stop being oppressors and exploiters and offenders, and to develop a heart that is more filled with love, which is the gift of the Holy Spirit. And then also in that presentation at U of the University a year ago, I mentioned other things like the 4th chapter of Luke, as I referred to already, that Jesus, in his first sermon, he found the place in Isaiah, in the prophet Isaiah chapter 61. It says he found the place where it is written, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news. That's what gospel means, good news, to the poor, freedom to captives, and to the blind new sight, to set the downtrodden free, and to proclaim a year of Jubilee. Year of Jubilee involved the forgiving of debts and the release of slaves.